Hello everyone, so my name is Nabilah Apsari Hayu Kinasih. I'm from Diponegoro University and I would like to present about competition and irreversible investment. And I'm from Diponegoro University. So the next slide will be introduction. There is what is investment? Investment is the act of accruing an immediate cost in the expectation of future payoff. However, when the intermediate cost is sunk at least partially and there is uncertainty over future rewards, the timing of the investment decision becomes crucial. Each firm has only one investment opportunity which is completely irreversible, and the product market reveals an inverted U-shaped relationship between firm profits and industry size. That is, positive externalities tend to dominate for low initial market size levels, whereas negative externalities tend to dominate at higher market size levels. So there are markets that shows greater profitability when more than one firm has already invested. This situation could arise in the case of goods that exhibition network externalists, so that the utility of each consumer increases as the total number of consumers purchasing the same or compatible brands increase. The decision by multiple rival firms set up the interconnection network to satisfy as interdependent demand for telecommunication service number of potential customers. So in the next slide we will have the model assumptions, where the first one is at any time the unequal firm may decide to enter a new market. Firms are risk neutral and discount the future returns at the risk interest rate P. All firms are identical and their size TM is infinitesimally small with respect to the market. Firm can either commit to a low cost with or undertaking or single irreversible investment which requires initial sunk cost K equals to W divided by P. Firms are free to enter since entry is irreversible. The firms already in the market do not have other decisions to make. Each firm has zero operating options, and then the number of firms currently active at time or T is an industry-specific shock, and the function UM is twice continuously differentiable in M, increasing over the interval and decreasing thereafter. So the last one is the industry-specific shock following psychometry diffusion process. So the next slide will have problems. The profitability of mistakes is reduced also as uncertainty increases, the third part of the proposition. The greater the uncertainty over future values of their shock, the larger the return the firms will demand before they will consider making the irreversible investment, which translates in an increase. However, a high level of it delays the moment at which it becomes advantageous to enter, and the same way it signals that the profitability of the market will be maintained of the market even longer, which favors coordination among potential errands. So the next slide will be problem 2, where the second problem that must be considered, that is continuous time games. There is no notion of last time before the real line is not well ordered, and therefore introduction cannot be applied. This denies the possibility of building up an expected value from which to deduce the optimal subgame, the perfect equilibrium state strategies by working backward from the end using longer subgames. So the next slide will be Vodenberg and Tirol and Simon and Stichman, where there is loss of information in the attempt to represent continuous time equilibria as the limits of discrete time mixed strategies equilibria. They argue that in this kind of games, a strategy cannot be represented by a single distribution function. To correct for this loss of information, the extend strategy space to specify not only the cumulative distributions that player has entered by the time given that the others have not yet entered, but also the intensity of items in the internal. So the next slide is a formal analysis, where as the stimulationist investment scenario by letting the firms play mixed strategies is outcome equivalent to the one in which firms employ pure strategies. We conducted analysis as if each firm uses as a stopping rule, where it is a pure Markovian strategy that specifies the critical value for the shock beyond the firms invest. So the next slide will be the optimal trigger value with negative externalities. So by taking the derivative of the above expression with the respect in solving, it is easy to show that the optimal result is equivalent. Although at first glance this result seems surprising, it is not. It is consistent with the properties of the dynamic programming principle of optimality for symmetric equilibrium and earning in entry strategies. The optimality principle says that an optimal path has the property that is given in the initial conditions and control values over an initial period. The control over the remaining period must be optimal for the remaining problem, which the state resulting from the early decisions considered in the initial conditions. So the next slide will be the optimal trigger value with positive externalities. So we're in this case of m is reduced by m0, we have to show three things. The first one is that a single firm can no longer claim to be the last to enter the industry, and therefore the optimal competitive trigger is no longer equivalent to the trigger of a firm in isolation. The second one is that the candidate policy described in the result satisfy the necessary and sufficient conditions of optimally. And then the third one is that a subgame is a perfect equilibrium. So in this paper, we also have offered an initial investigation into the effect of competition on the irreversible investment decisions under uncertainty of the firms as generalization of the real opposition approach. We have considered a product market that allows simultaneous treatment of two different cases, namely those of positive externalities for low level of market size and negative externalities for high level of market size. The latter case corresponds to the traditional competitive industries in which the investment of one firm lowers the profitability of others. So in this case, the firms invest sequentially as the market profitability that develops. So the next slide is the former case corresponds to industries in which investments are mutually beneficial, where the investments of one firm initially the profitability of other firms' investments. So in this case, we find that firms invest stimulously after the profit of the market has developed sufficiently. By sufficient, we mean profit levels that triggers a first investment under negative externalities. This trigger determines endogenously the optimal startup size of the industry. Not excluding further improvements, putting together these theoretical results may help to explain both the recent rapid and sudden development that has occurred for internet investment, for example, the setting up of dot-coms of the World Wide Web for e-commerce, and many prolonged startup problems while awaiting market development, as for example, the story of the digital fax machine shows. So in conclusion, some extensions can be easily incorporated, such as the conclusions of finitely lived capital projects, stage investment, growth options, and operation options that can lead to suspension of definitive abandonment of the investment. The model also permits study of the efficiency of the investment if term, where in this equilibrium assessment does the efficient every partant occur in equilibrium. So this study can be conducted considering in the comparative solution, where the investment decisions are determined by maximizing the sum of firms' value functions or introducing a true social value function. So finally, a more substantial modification concerns the comparison with the case in which there is a monopolist which possesses all the investment opportunities. Although intuitively the startup random in this case is much simpler, of particular interest in the analysis of the startup conditions and the optimal work size. In the specific, where network externalities are present, it may be profitable for the monopolist to sacrifice profits in the short term in the hope of raising prices in the future after the demand has grown and consumers are enjoying network effects. So that's all from me. Thank you.